Mark, you mentioned in your keynote that today we're in an identity crisis. I agree, but tell us a little bit more about what you mean by that and why you think the industry needs to evolve.
Yeah, I think partly what's happening is kind of three dimensions of the identity landscape that I think are changing pretty dramatically today, Cole. I think one is, we would call it, I guess, scale, which is just the sheer volume, the volume of identities, the volume of those entitlements of those identities they're trying to get to, or the application environments they need access to, and increasingly directly to data, whether that's large data sources like Snowflake or Databricks, whether that's LLMs. There's just this, on almost all of those dimensions, just a sheer scale explosion almost. The second we would refer to as shape. Maybe that's not the perfect term, but I think it captures it, which is the complexion and nature of the identity landscape, which was at one point when we started the industry 20 years ago, mostly employees, and certainly non-employee humans became part of that landscape, contractors, third-party contractors, and business partners, things like that. But then now, of course, the big hot topic is non-human identities, which we tend to divide into the machine identities, bots, service accounts, RPA, even some of the IoT devices, and then the world of agentic, which we all, I think, see as the potential largest tidal wave of all, and maybe a different kind of identity than we've ever seen before. So that would be the shape. And then the last would be the speed, right? The rate of change. So just the speed at which all these things are unfolding and changing. I think almost anyone you talk to in the realm of AI says, wow, this is changing quarter by quarter, if not month by month, not year by year. So the scale of things happening, the shape of the identity landscape, the speed, that's together, we think, creating kind of an identity crisis. And the industry needs to adapt by becoming far more real-time and dynamic in how we manage these things, not kind of what we used to call admin time. Not every so often, hey, Cole, you changed jobs, time for some new access. So it's like day to day, hour by hour, maybe minute by minute, you might need different levels of access.
Yeah. So some of that's been there for a while. Like, as both of us have been doing this for a bit.
Yep.
I know from the enterprise clients that I have worked with in the past that like the volume of the entitlements especially has always been huge. I think authorization is having a moment though. Like it feels like right now we're finally starting to care about that in a way that we never have been before. Like, talk us through that a bit and how that fits into the context of the three different dimensions that you were talking about.
It's a great point. Yeah, I think you and I have got some security background. I know a lot of our listeners will as well. There was some confusion, I think, early on, especially in the non-identity deep parts of the industry, both security and even broader, to say, oh, this whole SSO MFA thing is about identity security. And you and I know that's the authentication piece, right? Which is, I just need to prove you're really Cole. Great, got it. Now you can log into a bunch of stuff. Matter of fact, I'll make it easy. I'll let you log into a bunch of stuff as long as you securely authenticated to me first. Now, Okta, Microsoft, Ping, folks like that can get you in, right? Matter of fact, Cole, I don't know if this is helpful. We often compare this to the analogy of a building, like going to a New York skyscraper, right? Where you go check in at the bottom floor, you see a security guard, you show him your license, but once you go past that security guard, he's strongly authenticated you. You're in the building, which is like logging in. The security guard loses track of, he doesn't know where you go in the building, what floor you're on, what room you're trying to get into. To us, that's the difference between authentication, which is an important first step. Can you even get into the building? But once you're in the building, where you can actually go and what you can do, that's authorization. And to your point, that's where everybody's mind is shifting to, because it's really protecting all the data we care about in our enterprise, which is in all those rooms, to keep the metaphor for a second, right? That's what's really hard. And it's just going to get harder when it's not a bunch of people trying to access that data. It's a bunch of these non-human identities trying to access that data.
Yeah, I think that exactly captures the nuance. I mean, to me, it's authentication is necessary and important, but insufficient for fully controlling access. Like, authorization is really where it's at.
100%.
If you've been doing that for a while, and you know the way that apps work, and you know the way that identities work, I think that's going to matter a lot more in this new.
Well, and you're so familiar with the industry, Cole. I think another thing we've also had to educate folks that are newer to the space is, well, they hear about privilege and think, well, that's important. It's really deep. And we say, if you want to keep our building metaphor for a second, that's like you have really tight control over 3 rooms in the building, like privilege is super important in the enterprise today, but it's usually a very limited set of important things like databases or Unix systems or Windows systems, but it's a very limited set of users over a very limited set of assets or resources. Again, the realm we're heading into, like you said, is much more the whole building, all the rooms and places where you can get interesting data. That's changing the mindset of it's not just a handful of things we need to tightly control. We really need deep controls over everything, maybe at a point in time, and that's going to change how we think about it.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you see identity moving beyond just a security control to becoming a real business enabler? Like, this is a thing we've talked about for a while, and you kind of hear business enablement ad nauseum, but I think there's something unique and special happening here. I'm curious what your take is on why.
Well, again, I'll start with the human analogy because I think that helps people get it, which is, the whole lifecycle management or the joiner, mover, leaver, these terms we've all used in our space for a long time, was sort of about that, right? Hey, you just joined our org either as an employee or signed along with a contract or a business partnership. Well, now I'm going to set you up with the access you need, right? Okay, great. That seems like an important thing to focus on. Let's do that. Well, that was an enablement function, effectively. To do your job, I've got to enable you to get the stuff you need to do your job, right? Well, I think, again, getting into that non-human world that's exploding all around us now, just think of the enablement that can happen if you have good controls and can do that rapidly and securely, and the lack of those controls may cause you to be hesitant and maybe overly cautious. And I told folks in my experience in this industry for so many years now, I've never seen a situation where I feel like customers have their foot on both the gas and the brake at the same time, right? They're trying to press the gas, go faster. We got to adopt these new technologies. They're going to change everything. It's going to make us more effective, more efficient, competitive in our business. And then the brake is just about as heavy right now with people going, whoa, 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 this is risky. We don't understand it. We don't know what this is going to expose. So there's this sense of customers literally like part of the organization pressing on the gas, part is pressing on the brake. And I think that's the tension we're feeling in these companies.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think the unique thing about agents specifically, if you've used any of the really good ones and the powerful ones, are they kind of pull you into putting your foot on the gas, right? Like there's this different level of inertia there that you're not used to just using a regular application. Like it's innocent and it's addicting, where they want you to do more, and their sole purpose in life is to complete work on your behalf, right? And so that's the part that makes you, I think, want to get on the gas. But the flip side is that they can go off the rails once in a while, and then you sort of get pulled back into reality and realize, like, hey, we do need guardrails on these things.
100%. Yeah, one of the funniest moments for me in the last 6 months, whenever I first heard the term hallucinations, I'm like, what? Like, wait, technology can hallucinate? Is it taking the wrong drugs? What's happening here? But I think at the end of the day, this idea that you're right, it kind of draws us in a good way. A lot of times, like, oh, well, if I change the prompt or the question or what I'm asking the agent to do a little more, I might get far better information. Like you said, it's in a good way drawing you in to get more depth, more insight. But then occasionally you'll find, oh, that was an insight that wasn't accurate. Uh-oh, what do I do with that? How do I manage that? So I think, yeah, there's a tension there where people want to move fast to adopt these things, to learn, to get great insights from their data, and they're just not quite sure they totally trust it yet.
Yeah. So with the rise of AI agents, how should organizations be thinking about securing both agents and then the non-human identities that they rely on to execute their work?
I think it's going to be a set of concepts that are similar and a set that are pretty different. I think in the similar part, there's going to be kind of a life cycle for these other types of identities, right? When do they begin? How do they change over time? When should they end? Is there evidence that they might have been compromised based on the behaviors they're performing? And does that make me question whether there might have been something that's happened in the environment? I always say at the front end, though, of the non-human realm, there's some disciplines we didn't have to do in the realm of human identity management. The three that we've talked about at SailPoint are discovery, right? You didn't have to discover the humans. You got told that somebody got hired or got a contract. They were made clear to you, so to speak. What we're going to learn about all these things is In the case of some of the other machine identities, bots and other things, they've been around for a while, but very few companies have a healthy inventory or a full understanding of what they've got, where it is. So there's a discovery/inventory. There's a classification, which is, okay, what kind of thing is this? What is it capable of? And then there's an ownership question, which is, now that I know we have this non-human identity, what person is actually responsible for it? One of the snarky things I've said about this is nobody's going to be suing an agent if something goes wrong, right? There's going to be some person that's ultimately responsible, or the organization will have to answer for something an agent did. So these non-human entities will have to be owned by some person who will take accountability and responsibility for what that thing is doing and whether it's doing what you expected it to. I'd say the other thing, Cole, that's really different here, we didn't always articulate this, but the history of our space is when we talked about identity, security, identity management, we were really talking about, hey, Cole, based on your role, you can access these applications in the company, right? You can get to SAP or not. You can get to Workday or not. And once you're in there, what entitlements do you have? What can you see? What can you do? Can you just view things? Can you change things? All those classic access questions. Well, if you think about these non-human identities, they're not going to be logging into apps. They're not going to really be bound by entitlements. They're going to go to LLMs. They're going to go to Snowflake and Databricks and massive data stores. So the whole concept that we built around human identities is going to look kind of different in this world of non-human. There isn't a login. There isn't an entitlement in the way we've traditionally thought of it. So we're going to have new constructs and new ways of thinking about how to protect our data when that's the way these identities are coming at it. So I think those are some of the most notable differences, even though there are some similarities.
Yeah. One of the constructs I was curious to ask you about is like, where do you sit on the spectrum of agents being more like an application or a traditional app that we, would have known and loved versus being more like a user? Or is it both? That's the part I'm wrestling with, is I think it might actually end up being all of the above.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think we're going to see a scale here, or a range of things. I think there are going to be some fairly simple agents that will be almost a first cousin to a machine, right? The definition of machine identities is kind of programmatic, right? They're programmed to do something and they do it every time, right? The concept of an agent is it's going to potentially have some ability to learn and change and adapt and all those things. But even along that spectrum, I think we're going to see tremendous difference from kind of a simpler agent that might feel a little closer to the machine end of the spectrum, and a very sophisticated, I'll call it a super agent, that can even spawn sub-agents. I think I always say, when you want to freak security people out, tell them that there's an identity that can create another identity that you didn't know about, right? That's very frightening if you're the security professional. But I think at the far end of that non-human, particularly agentic identity world, you're going to see some very sophisticated things that are far more human-like, because they'll learn and adapt and literally try things and see if they work. And if they don't, try something else, just like a person learns, right? Oh, that didn't work. Let me try a different route to try to get that question solved. So to your point, I think we're going to see so much rapid evolution here because of the nature of this machine learning technology, of how fast these things are adapting, and we're going to have security technology that's kind of tracking with that. And I think a lot of this is going to be very rapidly evolving.
Yeah, for sure. What defines this new era of identity security, and how is it different from what you've seen in the past?
Yeah, I think the term we're choosing for now, we'll see if it sticks in the industry. We like it a lot. Is that term is adaptive identity. And the reason we've chosen that term is we talked about the enablement. We think on the positive side, you want to have identities that are very responsive and rapid so that you can quickly do things that you want to do and do them safely. On the other side, you want to just as quickly take away things or stop them or block them if they appear to be problems or anomalous or dangerous. Well, I think that's part of the adaptive identity concept, which is very rapid and dynamic change happening in the environment. But again, we sometimes say moving from admin time to real time, right? The nature of IGA, our part of the space, has always been kind of admin time. We'll set you up. We'll get to that within a day or a week when you join the company or connect to our business. And ideally, we'll disable your access right as you leave. It doesn't always happen that way in a lot of organizations, right? And of course, even more admin time has been the compliance thought that on some periodic basis, quarterly, annually, let's validate that everything is correct. I think we're just moving to a world where the thought that once a year is sufficient to make sure things are accurate is ridiculous, right? We're going to quickly see auditors, much less internal audit, and others say that's not sufficient to secure us. We need to have much more real-time understanding of of the environment. So the dynamism, the real-time nature of it, those things are changing. So I think in many ways, this concept of adaptive identity says we're going to have to understand this incredibly complex realm of identities. We're going to have to really understand our data estate and what data we have and what data we care about. And then this is really important, Cole, this tie-in of this whole identity landscape to the security world. I think the biggest change that's going to be happening in that realm is the security realms of network security, device security, cloud security are going to have to be infused with identity awareness. They're going to have to say, when I see issues or anomalies or potential vulnerabilities and threats, I've got to map that to the identity and the data that's being affected. Today, that's very difficult in most organizations. We're going to have to bridge that gap, and it's going to take a lot of collaboration across the industry to make that happen.
Yeah. What makes you hopeful or optimistic that organizations are ready for adaptive identity? Like, if I think about most of the organizations I've worked with, we got comfortable with the idea of adaptive authentication, which is, that idea has been around for a while, and that, that seems approachable. Adaptive identity and authorization at the authorization level is a much different and much more involved undertaking.
Yes.
Why are we ready for that?
I think it's maybe a classic push-pull here. I think as companies want to take advantage of some of these technologies, what they're going to find is I need to have these kind of controls to move rapidly to adopt them, but to do so safely, right? The old adage we've said for years in security, which is why do race cars have brakes? The answer is so they can go fast, right? I need to know that I can speed into a turn, brake to navigate that turn, and then zoom out of it again, right? Have to have a great engine and a great brake system to be an F1 race car driver, right? So there's that sense of you're going to get pulled to do this because the organization, the business side of the organization wants to adopt these technologies and take advantage of the opportunity. The flip side, I think, is you're going to have to be able to say, but I have the controls in place. So I know I can do this and do it safely. So I think organizations are going to find their business users pulling them, and then they're going to get pushed, I think, by the security world to say, you've got to protect this stuff. And so I think it's going to be a bit of a push-pull here where both the draw to take advantage of this technology and the need to do it securely is going to get people motivated very quickly to do these things. That's what we see unfolding as we talk to some of our leading customers, other vendors in the space, and a lot of the SIs who are working with these folks.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Mark. This is a great discussion. I appreciate the time.
You too, Cole. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for doing this.